Suneta, thank you so much for joining me on the Teachers Podcast today.
Thanks.
You've travelled quite a long way to be here, so Birmingham, and obviously you mentioned that you've stayed in York for the weekend.
Right. Yeah.
So you've been in the best county ever.
Yes, very true.
Yeah, and the best capital city, because it's still the capital in
Yes.
Yorkshire, you know.
Yes.
So, tell me everything about yourself.
Sure.
Go.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm Suneta Bagri. So I've been in education for 20 years, over 20 years now.
You just don't look that old.
I really am.
You don't look it.
Yeah, thank you. So I've always wanted to be a teacher ever since I can remember. I had probably didn't have the greatest home life when I was growing up as a child. Mm-hmm. My parents are immigrant family, and survival was really their number one priority. Mm-hmm. And I suppose when your survival is your key, sort of driver, then day-to-day life can become quite challenging, and not seeing the bigger picture can also be a hindrance. So I guess for my parents that was, just keeping a roof over our heads, being able to give us food and just trying to look after our basic needs. But I was a little girl with a dream, and I wanted to be more and have more and achieve more. So school became a really, really safe place for me, and I absolutely loved it. It was a C of E. I went to a Christian-based faith school, and always been really interested in spirituality. Used to love singing along to the hymns, and my opportunity to connect with whatever energy was inside me at the time and what I understood of that. So school was just as happy filled memories of friends and great opportunities and teachers who believed in me. So I think at a very early age I knew that I wanted to be a teacher, and actually knew that what I wanted to do was be a teacher at that school.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of had that in my head always. Always interested in personal development. So I remember turning to personal development at the age of 18.
Which is really young.
Which is very young, yeah. But then I think it's also a sign that things in my personal life, home life, were troubled. So I was always looking for a way to gain strength. And when that strength doesn't always come from your parents, then you're looking for, a way to manage that. So... And I also remember, because there's big age gaps between my siblings and I, so I also recall sort of from the age of 11 being a really significant age. It was a time when my sister got married, so she's much older than me. We moved house, went to secondary school. My brother joined the youth training scheme, so I became very isolated at the age of 11, being the youngest sibling of 3.
How much older than you were they?
So my sister's 10 years older than me, and my brother's 5 years older than me. So when I'm 11, she's 21 and he's 16.
At that age, it's a big gap, isn't it?
It is, and I think that's the impact of my home life became quite significant for me as growing up. So I got through secondary school, probably with less passion than I had at primary school, just because secondary school is different. But nonetheless, I made it to university, which wasn't an easy thing for me either. As I said before, my parents weren't necessarily, that wasn't their priority. Their priority was getting us, married and settled so that we didn't really feel like a burden to them.
So how did they feel about it then when you said you wanted to go to university?
But they didn't back it at all. They didn't support it at all, and I was really lucky to have the support of my siblings who didn't go to university themselves, but absolutely did value the fact that they didn't want that to happen to me.
I suppose as well, with them being quite older, I suppose that could have helped rather than them just being the same age.
So. Yeah, I definitely think so. I think they had that sort of wisdom. I mean, my sister really was like a mother, she did really look after me in that way. So I got to university, and when you enter a very different arena, I lived away from home, so it was a very, very big change. I did turn to personal development at that age. So made it to university, did really well. I think I really regained my passion for education again. I was on the path. I think that dream was becoming a real reality for me. So I just put everything I had in it and went for it. I was the first trainee in my group out of 120 trainees, where I was able to, I was the first one to get a job, and it was the school that I was a pupil at. It was my own primary school, so that was great.
Wow, okay, right, so from there then, you got a job.
Yeah,
there.
Got a job.
How did you progress through your career then?
So I went into teaching, loved it, started to work in London. I managed to do a year in the school that I mentioned. I started off as a pupil. I really, really enjoyed it there. Had lots and lots of great learning to do. But I think when I trained in London, I became very... I love the melting pot of London. I love the diversity and the inclusion and the challenge of London inner city schools. So I went back to work in London and very quickly started to progress my career. I was very ambitious, and I think what happens is when you do have struggles and when you do have to fight for something, what it certainly does make you is very, very determined and very motivated. Yeah. So just progressed through my career, moved from London to the West Midlands, met my husband, decided to move to the West Midlands, and from that point really just started to work on my career goals, which were very much about senior leadership. Yeah. So progressed through phase leader, assistant head teacher, deputy head teacher, and over the last 4 years I've been a head teacher. So I've come out of that role.
Wow.
Very recently.
So you've done it all.
Yeah, I do say, I have experience. I've 20 years, but I have had a really, really good depth and breadth of experiences.
Yeah, that's amazing. Right, okay. So we had a conversation earlier. Now, personal development is something that is known about a lot in terms of business, so I know a lot about it, but there might be teachers listening thinking, what is personal development? And so one of the questions we always ask at interview, especially for senior roles, is, as a company, we're really into personal development. What are you doing for your personal development? And often the answers are strange because the term is not understood.
Yes.
So what's your definition of personal development for everybody?
Commitment to self-improvement. That's really what it is. It's about having an evolving mindset which is going to make you better as a person. So
does that mean, personal development means I'm going to be better at my job, or can it be anything?
So we're people first and we're professional second, which has always been my motto. So your commitment is firstly and foremost to your personal development, because once you've got those foundations in place, then that's the premise to start moving forward. If you haven't got, your grounding, if you haven't got the mental flexibility in thinking, if you haven't got the attitude for your well-being and that commitment to being well in yourself as a person and understanding what that means, then how can you be a good professional? How can you be a good teacher, a good business person? So really, the personal development are your fundamentals as a person. Yeah.
So if a teacher's listening now and they're thinking, this is the first time really I've heard about personal development and what it is, at what point could somebody start? Like, what kind of things should they be looking to work on, maybe as a first instance?
So health and well-being. So your health and fitness levels will be the first thing to work on if you don't know where to start. So there's lots of different areas of personal development, but your starting point would be your health, because your physical health and your mental health is really your sustenance. So everything that you eat, everything that you drink, everything, the way that you move, the way that you look after your body, that is all personal development.
It really does sort of make a difference as well, doesn't it? What you're eating and what how much you're drinking for your brain power and how quickly you can do things.
It's essential.
Okay, so you said that you started personal development at 18, and obviously I've already talked about the fact that's quite young. Who introduced you to it?
So I was at school, had a part-time job when I was still at school and sort of going over to college, and I was working in an electrical superstore. It's closed down now, but I used to work in an electrical superstore, and there's an older friend, a colleague of mine that we used to at break time we used to sit and talk a lot, and he was going through some depression, and we used to just cherish those cups of coffee and having a chat, and it was him. He's moved to Italy now. His name's Tom, and he moved and did some amazing things in his life as a result of turning to personal development. But it was him. He introduced me to the first book that I got, which was You Can Heal Your Life by Louisa Hay.
Yeah. Amazing, thank you. All right, so you mentioned then that you got the job that you wanted, that you always dreamed you would have, so I guess you were visualising that.
Yes.
Was there anything else that you did in terms of personal development wise that you think sort of secured that job for you?
I work really, really hard, and I've got a really good work ethic, and I've always been a goal setter. I've always been somebody I know what I want and I just go for it.
Yeah.
And I don't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
And I tend to have a very solution focused approach. When I want something, then it's about how do I make it happen.
Yeah.
So it's a way that you kind of apply your mind to what you want to get. So that's an approach in itself, and that's why in my coaching, I call myself a mindset coach, because it really is about developing a mindset towards what you want. So it is an approach. It's about what do I want, how am I going to get it, and how am I going to make it happen.
Yeah, and with that, I guess, comes confidence as well, which always helps. Being confident that you are going to get that role or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So you mentioned that you've been a head teacher.
Yes.
So what's the reaction from other head teachers about personal development?
I think you're right in what you said earlier. There is still a lot of unknown and people don't always understand it. But I think what I've really noticed is I've had great support from my colleagues, and I have a lot of head teacher colleagues. I've had really good support. And that is definitely because teacher retention is at an all-time crisis point.
Yeah.
So how do we look after our teachers to keep them well? And yes, workload is one approach, which is the one that the DFE seems to advocate the most, but there is more to that. There is a lot more to that, and the signs and symptoms of burnout certainly indicate all of that. So I've had really good response. I've had really fantastic support, and people are more open-minded, I think, now to innovative ways and approaches, because really at the heart of it, we're all caring professionals that really care about the children, but equally we are beginning to recognise, because it's all, it's hitting us all in the face like a brick, because 4 out of 10 teachers are predicted to leave within the next 5 years. So how are we going to tackle this? So I think people are being supportive because there is much more understanding about well-being and looking after our teachers. So good.
I think as well, we're a lot more aware of mental health now, aren't we? And maybe part of it where we're becoming more open-minded is partly because we've run out of other options.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, it's so true. Why not give it a go?
Yeah.
And, as a head teacher myself, I would say what I experienced in terms of staff absence was 50 to 60%, if not more, absenteeism was due to a mental health condition.
Yeah.
And that's, I wouldn't be alone in that. I know my head teacher colleagues would also say that, you have lots of staff away due to a trauma, due to some stress, due to having an incident occur in their life, which has left them absolutely drained. And that requires emotional support, and that doesn't just stop after having 2 weeks off work. It's ongoing. They still need that. So even getting them back into the workplace, because their resilience is low, because their emotional energy is, really challenged and really jeopardized. So trying to get them back into the workplace often requires a staggered return to work. And then it also requires the team at work being, sometimes the individual wants others to know what's happened, and sometimes it's confidential. So as a head, you have to manage that balance, because confidentially, peers that are going to support, colleagues that are going to support, you can only give them minimal information, but as a head, that you're going to require a whole team approach to get this person back in the workplace. And that's one of the things that colleagues feel, teachers feel really guilty about, because that can hinder them from coming back into the workplace, because they don't want to be a burden, because teaching is such a tough profession that if they come back and their year group colleague is doing 70-80% of the planning for them, then that's not something that they feel comfortable about. So it really does require a high level of skill to manage those situations. but then that comes right from the top, and it's about the culture that you set in a school that you work in.
I find that really interesting that you've mentioned about that trauma, because on some of the life-work balance episodes that I did earlier on in the year, we talked about that, and it's almost like teaching just takes everything that you just can't take a trauma of any kind. You can't take somebody in your life dying. You can't take somebody getting an illness, because it just pushes you over the edge, because you just at capacity with like the stress levels and everything like that.
Yeah, that's so tough, isn't it? And how can how can you compartmentalise that and put it away in a box? It's just not possible.
You can't, especially when work is such a big part of anyone's life anyway, but for a teacher, that's like, two-thirds of life, isn't it? Rather than just the 1/3.
And for some, it's, it is all consuming. Well, for a lot of us, it's all consuming. So, yeah, it's really tough thing to ask.
I guess as well, back to the head teachers, the fact that you've been a head teacher for 4 years and have obviously got results in your own school, will help with, persuading them to your ways of thinking.
Yeah, I think so. I think that definitely has leverage,
So what are your tips then for retaining teachers?
My tips for retaining teachers would be, the first thing really is just to make sure that everybody in your school staff has a voice, and that they feel really valued in that. So you have to have a very open and transparent culture in a school. Without that premise, I think, you're always challenged as a teacher. When you look at burnout, it is very much about, where a school is committed to your well-being, it will show in the way that you are communicated with. It will show in the way that you are valued. It will show in the way that you are respected. It will show in the way that the emails come through. Is there consideration about whether emails only come through between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m, for example. So it's very difficult to say what retains a teacher, because every school culture and ethos is so very, very different. So I can just share with you where some of my own successes, and also some other colleagues, obviously being in teachers so long, majority of my friends are teachers. So if I share those experiences, it's always going to be the colleagues that feel valued right from SLT, right from, the head teacher setting the tone for, walking the walk, but not just talking the talk, but walking the talk, and actually being the person that, for me, has the biggest impact in a school. Because if they see the head teacher with their sleeves rolled up, in the heart of it, if a teacher is away, stepping into the classroom and doing what it takes, even if it's a teacher running late and going in to do registration or covering a break, and having just a really compassionate attitude towards their staff. From my experience, teachers will go to the moon and back for you if they see you care, and if they feel that if they've got to go and see their child's assembly or of course we've got boundaries, of course we've got policies in place, and they're there for a reason. But at the heart of it, if you're a head teacher or if you're a senior leadership team that lead by example, and you treat your staff with compassion, there isn't anything that the teachers won't do for you, because you're all coming from the same place. So I know that you're working hard for me, and I know that you're working hard for the children, but I hope that you can see I'm working just as hard for the school community, for the children, for you. And I think that level of respect really is where you get the buy-in from staff. It's great to have, there's a lot of troubled schools out there. So the schools that have got really clear practices that are formed from your policies, they seem to be schools that people's expectations are managed, and I think that's a really important part of teacher retention, because you've got the teacher standards, and you know what you did at college, and you know what those meant, and you know what evidence you had to prove to get to them and to prove that you're a teacher. But when you go into a school, those standards can be a bit inconsistent. So what you have to see, because no one wants to sit and read policies at the end of the day, in troubled schools it's absolutely necessary, and I've led very challenging schools that have been in requires improvement or special measures. So you sometimes have to start at that point.
Yeah.
But really, if you go into a school and your policies speak for themselves through the practice and they're exemplified in your colleagues and what everybody's doing, then people's expectations become very managed, and there's no question about what should I be doing or what is, because they see it all in practice. And you know, by nature, we as teachers, we like methodology. We like to have a system in place. It makes us feel secure, it makes us feel grounded, because as teachers we role model that to the children that we teach. Clear routines, clear boundaries, and that's what it is. But it has to be not a top down. So where a hierarchical hierarchy exists, we can't shy away from it, but that hierarchy shouldn't be felt.
Yes.
And I think that's where you get the most success in schools from my experience.
Yeah, I can see that, because I did a lot of supply teaching, day-to-day supply, when I set up Classroom Secrets, and I visited a lot of local schools, and I think I could tell just from one day in a school. And the schools that I really like to go back to, one of the schools was Ash Green, and the head teacher Mungo's actually been on the podcast, and I think if I could think of a word for him, it would be visible. So he was on the playground at lunch times, and one thing that he always did, if it had been a nice day and the children were maybe a little bit whipped up, he would sit them down for the first 10 minutes of the lessons, I suppose, and read them a story on the playground before they walked in.
Lovely.
And it's that
visibility
involvement,
is so important.
but also being involved and being responsible for the children's behaviour as well, instead of saying, no, your responsibility, close the door and don't send them to me.
Absolutely. And that's where, you know, that hierarchy exists, but where it isn't felt, because you're all part of a team, and there's absolute, you know, there's respect, there's a community of us working together, because we've chosen the profession, we want to do the job, but actually we're all on the same page. Very, very similar to a family approach, you know, where as a family you all work together and you make the team work. So I think from my experience, that's where schools are most successful.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Getting your hands dirty.
Definitely.
Getting your hands dirty.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about teachers being off, and obviously sometimes teachers are off with stress. How do you identify stress then? Because I think teachers can be stressed and not realise. I think I was definitely very stressed, and when I look back I think, those could have been some of the pointing factors, but I didn't realise. Yeah.
I think stress is, we all have stress, and I think there's something from the, I'm just going to read something quickly from the Education Support Wellbeing Index. So it says the disproportionately high levels of stress reported by the workforce impedes teachers' ability to effectively nurture children and young people. And then it also goes on to say that the interaction in the classroom of a stressed, overwhelmed, tired and unsupported teacher will inevitably be different to that of a supported teacher with a strong sense of professional autonomy, self-efficacy and balance between personal and professional life. So if we take that for example, so we know that a teacher who's well isn't going to show the same outward signs of stress. Now, stress can be very, very difficult to identify, because as teachers, we want to get it right for the children. And we are very giving people, we're very giving, and that's where the personal development side of it is so important, because the self-care part of personal development is absolutely key for us as professionals to stay well, so that when stress enters our lives, which it does, then we have the self-care tools to be able to manage it and still do the job. And where stress starts to show is when you fall behind on your marking. It's when behaviour management becomes much, much more challenging to control. And that, I know, is very contentious, because we are also working in a time where the demographic of children that is coming to us is very different, because, you know, things in our society have changed, and the way that children are raised and the way that technology impacts on children's upbringing also plays huge amounts of a role there. But going back to, you know, looking at stress in the classroom, what can be one of the most difficult things for even colleagues to realise is that people are managing stress on a daily basis, and we all do, and sometimes that stress can be, it's adrenaline, it's a healthy stress. Where it's healthy, we can kind of feel nervous, we've got, maybe we're delivering a CPD session, maybe we're seeing parents, or we're dealing with something, but it's almost that boost of energy can be very, very positive, and it gets us going, and that's a good thing. But where it starts to really eradicate and perhaps knock our confidence and start to really erode our well-being is like some of the things that I mentioned about, we just don't feel on top of it anymore. We're not prepared for lessons. We're falling behind on planning, and we just generally don't feel ready for the role. When that continues, then you're challenged by putting on a bit of a face to make everybody see that you're okay, you're able to do the job, but you tend to have a bit of a mask on because now you're actually not feeling great, and that stress and anxiety go hand in hand. That you've got these symptoms. These symptoms can manifest in a number of ways. They can be just having stomach ache or nausea, like nausea and nauseous feelings. It can be diarrhea, can be constipation. Headaches and migraines are absolutely reported, there's such a strong indicator of stress, like tension, headaches. Trying to manage the anxiety, that's a huge one. Feeling sick on the way to work in the mornings, going to sleep at night and not being able to relax, not being able to switch off, having heart palpitations at night, waking up with panic attacks in the night. They're all very, very obvious signs, aren't they, of stress. So how do we mask all of that? Because that's us, isn't it, as a person? So again, go back to the personal. We're people first and we're professional second. But we're trying to be professionals and we're trying to manage all of these symptoms. And when somebody asks you, are you okay? What do you say? Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And you're not fine. You're not fine at all. So what happens is you actually become conflicted with yourself. And when that happens, you're on a slippery slope downwards, unfortunately.
And all that giving as well that teachers do, the personal development aspect is getting something to fill your cup up, as it were.
Absolutely.
To then pour out of.
Absolutely. And they say that, don't they? On a plane, you put your own oxygen mask on first. And when you do that, you can look after your own children if you've got children. But it's just no different.
You're not going to be able to do it well otherwise.
Absolutely.
Okay. So when we're on the phone, you talked about principles of burnout. So what are the 6 principles of burnout then? Yeah,
so this is taken by Christina Maslach, these burnout indicators, and she's a professor of psychology in California. We've already talked about one of them, which is workload, and we know that that's the common one in schools that everybody tries to tackle, and I know there's a huge focus in the new Ofsted schedule as well around that, in the Ofsted framework. So the second one is about lack of control, when you don't feel you're in control, and that could be your life, control of your life, which is personal, but it can also be at work, when you don't feel that you've got control over your own teaching. That's a big one, because if we look at some of the multi-academy trusts and the way that they roll out what they want to do and what they want to happen in schools, then it can be a very systematic approach to teaching. Now that goes against everything that we have learned as nurturers, as educators. We nurture our children from a holistic child development point of view, and then all of a sudden we're being told that we are delivering this phonics scheme, or we're delivering this math scheme, and we've got to just go with it, which can be very difficult for some, when some people really like that. Some people like that framework of, okay, I know what I'm doing, and the accountability side of it is, it's almost at senior level. I'll do my bit and I'll do it well, but I know that if it's not working, I'm still doing what I'm told. So some people do like that. But where you're a confident teacher and you like taking risks yourself, then you want to use your assessment and what the children are showing you on a daily basis. You want to use that to then plan, guide, develop, and that's what outstanding teaching is, isn't it? Outstanding teaching is when you let the children be the leaders of their own learning. And if you're not in a position to do that, you're constantly feeling a lack of control. The next one is lack of reward. Now, not everybody feels that they are being acknowledged and are being rewarded for what they do at work. And I think when you feel that you are that type of person, that you like reward, then it can be quite dampening on your spirits when you don't feel that you're being rewarded. And if you look at teaching, it's actually a very rewarding profession, because of what you're giving to the children, and then what you get back is personally very rewarding, which can be very gratifying. And for many of us, that's what we like doing. You know, a profession can be really self-gratifying, and seeing the children make progress, for many of us as teachers, is more than enough of a reward. But in schools where that hierarchy exists, and it's also felt, and you see certain people being rewarded, maybe that might look like a fast-track promotion, or it might look like a pay rise, or it may look like somebody being given more responsibility, another. So there's those types of reward, and you're not part of that, and you can't understand why. That can be a real indicator as well, because these things start to have they start weighing you down. These thoughts start to really weigh you down. Schools where teachers have felt that they're not part of the community, they're not part of that team, they're working in isolation. I know lots of smaller schools, teachers have reported this as well, that where they don't have year group colleagues, so it's just a one-form entry school, and they're much younger. They're NQTs, and then the rest of the school are older, they're more experienced. So where they don't feel part of that community, that's another indicator. I've already touched on this, but lack of fairness. So where you're feeling that other people are being rewarded, or other people are being acknowledged, or the head teacher's taking out groups of people for, just special perks, I suppose, and you're not part of that. But you feel that, I work just as hard as the senior leadership team, for example. I work just as hard as the teachers. This could be TAs as well, Some of our TAs are just phenomenal in the amount of, I don't even like that hierarchy that exists, because in the children's minds, they just go home and say, my teacher. They don't know the difference,
especially the younger ones.
Definitely.
So my daughter obviously has a teacher and a teaching assistant, but I think she probably thinks a teaching assistant is the actual teacher.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because she talks about her an awful lot more.
They do, absolutely. And I remember I was head of a free school a couple of years ago, and free schools are great because they're very innovative, and they're always thinking of creative ways to look at staffing. So there are some free schools that don't have teaching assistants, they're just called associate teachers, and I love that. So there's that element of where they don't feel that people are being treated with equity and equality, then that again can have a real impact. I know I have talked about this earlier as well, about conflict of values. I talked about inner conflict, but where there is a conflict of values. So I'm sure, Claire, yourself being a teacher, you'll know that the educational landscape has changed so much so that, we've got schools that are exam factories, and it's just results. And where do we fit in with that, when actually we went into teaching because we love children, we love the difference we make to children, we love the imparting knowledge, we love nurturing their development, and we've been told to, but we've got to get them. We've got to get our school improvement data this year. We've got to get them to the top 70s or whatever it is that your target is. And then you take away from all those values that are important to us. So when you're at that stage where you're conflicted now with what's important to you and what's important to perhaps the leaders, then that can be, really damning. So if you're carrying all those factors around, and it's workload. For me, almost workload comes last when I like to talk about it, because the workload you kind of expect to have a bit of a handle on workload, because you've gone through your teaching practice, you've met the teacher standards, you haven't gone into teaching for the money, because I don't know the teacher that has. So you've gone into the profession for all of those reasons, understanding it's a heavy load, it's going to be difficult. But so some of those factors, when you look at burnout, you're not prepared to deal with those. You didn't know they were part of the package. So you're ready for the workload, and you kind of think, okay, I know it's going to be hard, I know there'll be some personal sacrifices or compromises, I prefer to call them, then that you're going to have to make. But then if you're conflicted, your values are conflicted because you're being told to do something that isn't aligned with you or your beliefs, or you don't feel part of your community or your team, and you're not supported, your well-being isn't of interest to anybody, you've got the stress, you've got the anxiety, and say you've got something happening in your personal life on top of all of that, where do you go?
No, you're not going to be able to do it. And also, workload, I mean, it's an overall term, isn't it? But it can mean so many different things in so many different schools.
It does.
And when you were listing those, I'm thinking, oh, I felt this in that school, and I felt this in that school, and I felt this in that school. And I think, for me in particular, you know, workload was an issue, but then it was the control element.
Yeah.
So, especially in a school where you get moved every year group,
Yeah.
you lose all control of ever being able to get on top of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Or if you constantly be given more, you don't have any control. And then the first primary school that I worked in, actually, so I was only there on supply, and in the year group there was an NQT, me. I didn't realise there was an NQT at first, actually. It took me a few weeks to realise. And then a third teacher who was actually the head of Key Stage 2, but that teacher was treated differently, very differently.
Yeah.
So they would go and do an observation in that person's classroom. They would get outstanding. They would never provide any planning. I went to that person on the first day and said, oh, I'm a secondary teacher, but I've been told that you would give me planning for today. And that teacher said, I don't share planning. And that's how I started my first day in a year 4 classroom.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really does play on your experience, I really think.
Yeah,
especially when you've got a number of those factors, when you just don't feel in control and things aren't fair and there is mounting workload.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it only takes 2, really, doesn't it, to topple you over?
Absolutely. Will you see that different strokes for different folks?
Yeah.
It's not a comfortable feeling. And if you're by nature a person that has strong values and strong morals, where do you fit in with that?
This is it.
Really play a part.
I remember for a couple of months in, actually. So I'd started around the November time, and that had happened, and then I realised we're an NQT in the year group, and we sort of thought, hang on, why are we doing it all on our own? Why don't we work together? We could work together as a pair, and we'll worry about what our classes are doing. So we spent a week over Christmas getting it all sorted. The NQT had gone to like the literacy coordinator for the council, because at the time they had people and had got some ideas of things, and so I did all the maths, she did all the literacy, and we spent a week of the Christmas holidays doing it. And we came back, and so this other teacher had said, oh, you know, what are you doing in literacy? And we thought, hang on a minute, you haven't done any of this work. We've spent all our Christmas doing this, you haven't done anything. So she kind of put her off quite a few times via email. Oh yeah, I'll send it, but she didn't send it. Now, I would have been that person who would have just sent it anyway. But anyway, when it came round to it, she called a book scrutiny and a planning scrutiny just for our year group to get the planning. And when we took it to the head teacher, it was like, yeah, it's so-and-so. And that is, and I just think...
It's not what you want to hear, is it?
I tell that story and I think, it's quite bad that, but how common is that?
It is common, unfortunately. I think when we talk about lack of control, then the opposite of that is autonomy. And I'll go back to that, where teachers feel the happiest, or what keeps them in a workplace, is where they do feel they have autonomy, and that they can have control of what they're doing, and giving people, like in that scenario that you just described, it is about giving people the because trust plays a huge part in that, because if you're giving somebody the autonomy to say, go ahead and do it like that, then what you're subliminally saying is that as a professional you're trusted. And that is so key, because you know you'll know this, I'm sure, in the work that you do and the professional dialogues that you have, that teaching is the profession where we don't feel like professionals. You know, when you look at the business world as well, you know, people are treated very differently. You have sort of business acumen, you have professional kudos, and then we think, well, if we really were given the same status, then surely we can decide what we teach and how we do it. Of course, that needs to be monitored, of course, you know, I'm not I'm not being wacky and saying, let's be totally maverick and do it. But there has to be some opportunity to be maverick.
Yeah.
There has to be, to say, let us have a go. We've met these standards. We've proved, gosh, they're not easy. 4 years at university are not easy standards to have shown and demonstrated that we meet. So if we've reached that, now let us have a go and support us, trust us.
So what's really interesting is we're having this conversation, you've been a head teacher and you're still saying these things. So when you were in school, did teachers have kind of the autonomy to do their own thing? Did you follow a scheme for maths, or could they follow what they wanted?
Different schools. I worked in lots of different schools, and some schools required, if they were schools in special measures, they really did just require a very autocratic, systematic approach to starting from we need to put policies in place. We need because ultimately we are responsible for the standards that the children meet, and we have to put in those right measures, and some of those were proven.
You kind of have to have
approaches.
building blocks first.
Of course
basically.
you do. Of course you do. And I think when you've got that bit, then you put your next building block, and then the next and the next. And I can't say that I've sustained headship in a school for a long period of time. I've done headship in lots of different schools, but the schools that I've worked in, very, very challenging. But in the last school that I worked in, that was a good school. Then you take a very different approach. And I had the most fantastic senior leadership team that they were dynamic, they were creative, they cared about the children. So of course, in that situation, have a go. What do you think works well? And I think it's about being a confident leader and knowing what that school and that there's just, again, it's different approaches for different schools. You would be wrong to go in and try and apply the same thing. So you have to have that situational leadership approach to examine the situation, get to see what your team's capabilities are, get to see what your team's limitations are as well. And that does take time to get to know that. But then once you know that, actually give them, because I love Richard Branson's approach. Yes. I absolutely love his approach to, he says, doesn't he, if you think you're the smartest person in the table, then it's time to leave the table. Yeah. And that absolutely is so true, because as a head, you've got to be a learner. You've got to know that they know more than you. Yeah. My job is to coordinate. My job is to really build this structure as an architect in this school, and to give all of these people that are going to build the capacity, so that really the way that I see it is a good school is when I don't need to be there. Yeah. That's the measure of a good school, because the senior leadership team are so well empowered that they know what they're doing, and it doesn't rely on me. So that's the sign of a good school, and actually recognising the strengths in your senior leadership team. It's
really interesting that you say that, because it's a sign of a good business as well.
Of course it is.
So I'm very much that person who I want to have really smart people around me.
Absolutely.
Telling me what to do.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right then. I'm loving this conversation, by the way.
Great.
It's kind of like
me too.
Business and teaching merge.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got some questions from the team then. So Claire wants to know, why did you want to develop the wellbeing of teachers?
Because there's a lot of people that are talking about this crisis, and there's not enough people doing anything about it. And I think I got to the end of 2018, and I just started to see this repetition of what's not right. And for me, there was just absolutely no doubt in my mind that it's the well-being of our teachers that has to be first and foremost. And I can't do that in a school on my own. But what I can do is try and join a force and try and create a movement, so that there is no choice but to start looking at the well-being of our teachers. And there's that saying, isn't there? If you want to see the change, then you need to be the change. Yeah. So that's why I did that.
Okay. So we're talking about well-being of teachers. I hate the word well-being. I hate it.
Do you?
Because I just don't feel like we really know what it means.
Yeah.
I think that could mean a compulsory yoga class.
Yeah.
So tell me about it. What should it be?
Sure.
What should it not be?
Yeah. So it has to be far removed from tokenism. So I read a comment from a head teacher over the weekend on LinkedIn, and she had posted that she was going back to school today, and she had created wellbeing packs for all her staff. And in those wellbeing packs were lip balm, hand cream, post-it notes, pens, and sanitisation gel.
Mm-hmm. And I hate that anyway.
And lots of people have said that's lovely, and it really is.
Yes.
It really, really is a really nice gesture. She'd obviously gone to a huge amount of, you know, trouble. If she saw it as trouble, she'd made a real effort.
Yeah.
So she'd bought some cellophane packages, and she'd really made an effort. And that's not well-being in my eyes.
No.
That's a really nice gesture, and it's a nice little goodie bag. It's a little pamper kit, but
it's a step towards making people feel valued, I guess.
100%, and it really is a nice gesture, because not a lot of heads do that.
No.
But we can't confuse that with actual well-being.
Yes.
Because if you've got a teacher that's dealing with a crisis or a personal trauma, or just dealing with stress and anxiety, are they going to say, I'm okay, I'll just reach out for my lip balm? They're not going to do that, are they? What they want to do is actually have the tools, or have the time, or have the therapy to make themselves feel better, so that they've got better control over their mind to sustain the challenges. So we've got to be really clear about what well-being actually is. And well-being is a feeling of feeling well consistently, majority of your life, majority of your days, that you feel that, I'm not having a great day, but I'm going to bounce back. I've got the ability to just bounce back after a little setback. For some, it's not a little setback, it's a big setback, but it's knowing that I will be okay, I will see this through, and I need to deal with this. And for different people, dealing with a stressful situation means different things. Some people, what I am confident in saying is they need to deal with it. Where you start saying, I'm fine, I don't need to deal with it, or I'm strong, I'm okay, that's where it will only last you certain, it will, at some point, it will catch up with you, and it will bite you. So you do need to deal with your emotions in a much healthier way. And for some people that is crying it out. For some people that is shut off. For some people it is just watching some sad movies and kind of, just sobbing. It's different things for different people. And in exactly the same way, just as stress or stressful situations or trauma is dealt with differently, well-being is also different for different people. So I can't tell you what well-being should look like for you. All I can say to you is that well-being is going to be that you feel good about your life the majority of the time. But if you don't feel like that, and you're always finding sort of nice things to do, like buy a bottle of wine, because that's going to make you're going to do a hard day at work, and then you're going to go back and you're going to feel a bit rubbish, but to stop you feeling rubbish, you're going to have a glass of wine. And it's that, are you drinking for enjoyment, or are you drinking to get away from what you're not happy about? Is it, I'm going to get my nails done because that always I like looking at my nails and that's going to make me feel good. These are things that momentarily make us feel good, going out, have hair done, or going for a spa day, going out with our friends. They're all really important to our well-being, but they do nothing if consistently we're not feeling good about ourselves. Those things are more about self-care when we are feeling well in ourselves consistently.
So what do you do about this then? Because, so I think when I were in teaching, I think I was just exhausted because it had to be perfect, and you were just, if you're on supply, you don't really have the same control as other teachers in terms of having a TA to help you and things like that. And I think I was just exhausted all the time. And it wasn't that I couldn't sustain that for a short time. It was I couldn't sustain that for a long time. And when you're just not going to sort of see an end. So how do people get through that without leaving?
the importance of self-care has to be advocated there. And I think that you have to do a bit of an assessment of your life and your situation, because for so many, it is an exhausting profession, and it is what it is. It is what it says on the tin. So you have to kind of talk to yourself and, go back to, well, why am I doing this? Because for many of us, the driver of just helping the children make the progress is enough. And yes, you're tired, and yes, you're exhausted, and you accept that. But what are you doing to nourish yourself? What are you doing to care for yourself? What are you doing consistently? It's hard, but it's not impossible to take time out for you. Drinking more water, eating, I think I said this to you in a conversation earlier, when you're eating food, then ask yourself, is this feeding disease or is it fighting disease?
Yeah, I love that.
Because all of these things play a part, don't they? Is this going to make me feel, energetic and vital for this job that requires all of my energy? Or is it I'm going to feel good while I'm eating it momentarily again? But is it just going to, once the sugar rush dies down, is it just going to bring me down with a thud as well? So it's about really looking and looking at your picture. And that's where personal development plays a huge part, because actually knowing yourself as a person and what well-being means to you, you can then start to say, okay, I am exhausted, but now I'm going to start looking at the balance against the work that I need to do, and then the balance that I've got in my life. And if you haven't got the balance, how am I going to get it? So you have to be really enforce your boundaries, and you have to be really firm with yourself, and you have to say, I'm not actually going to mark after 6:30 p.m. Now, nobody really can tell you to do that. And that's where, again, personal development helps, because it's about you enforcing your boundaries. It's about you saying no. So if somebody at work is taking up all of your energy, then just, I can't talk, sorry, I'm really busy. It's not easy, but because you are your most important responsibility. The most important relationship you have is with yourself. So I'm feeling exhausted. I'm finding this job really challenging. What can I do about it?
Yeah.
Because I love working with the children. I love the difference I'm making to them. But now, do you know what? I've got to be really firm, and I've got to be obsessive about self-care. And it's about balancing that. And for many, time management is a huge thing. And that's one of my workshops, time management and self-efficacy. Until you get that bit right, you won't be able to make the time for self-care.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. And when I didn't know anything about personal development or in teaching, but I look back now and I remember, there were teachers in that first school who would stay till 8:30, 9 at night, but it's like they advocated it.
Yeah.
Like they were warriors, and they encouraged the NQT to do it as well. And you could get sucked in, and sometimes they come in your classroom and talk to you for 45 minutes, and you think, I want to go home and spend time with my children. I didn't have children at the time, my husband.
Yeah.
And then you end up taking those books home, and you were going to have to work anyway, but then you end up working more. And I remember then when I went to my next job, I didn't become a horrible person, but I felt horrible, because I used to go home and I'd say to my husband, he'd say, did you go to the staff room today? And I go, no, I didn't go to the staff room. In the lunch times I work, I'm not there to make friends. What I want to do is leave on time. But it's difficult, isn't it? Because you want to make relationships at work as well, but there's so much work to do. So put boundaries in place. It would be about putting, it's very isolating, and you do want to feel part of the team, and we know that, burnout could be caused if you don't feel that. But literally just be really strict with yourself and go, I'm going to go in on a Friday lunchtime, and that's the only day I'm going to do it. So you've got these really clear boundaries in place. Don't say no, don't say you're not going to do it, because that's not going to support your well-being at work, is it? If you haven't got meaningful relationships. But put boundaries in place. I had that a lot. I had to deal with that a lot. People saying, oh gosh, I'm not leaving until 6. But upon observation, they're not always using their time as wisely as they should be. Going into the staff room and having that chat for 45 minutes, yes, it will have, it will be a good feeling in terms of forming a relationship, but are you doing yourself any favours when now you're going home with a pile of books that you didn't need to be? So it is about really having the space to work that bit out for yourself. It's so tricky now, and I guess really when you go and if you do training in schools, and if everyone's thinking like that, I suppose that's when it can be transformative. Definitely. If everyone's sort of thinking in their own mind, okay, how do I manage my time better? How do I make sure that I get home on time? And I mean, the workload is big, but how do I make it take less time?
Yes, yeah.
Do you find that when you go into schools then, that you talk through these things and you talk about different ways to make, to manage the workload? Do you get any resistance from head teachers who still keep the same high levels of workload, or are they willing to change and look at things like verbal feedback where they can? I mean, what kind of...
I think whilst I'm not, I don't really advocate Ofsted's approach. I suppose what we can thank them for in the new education inspection framework is the fact that wellbeing is there, and there's a big focus on it. So I think whether you've got head teachers that didn't pay attention to it before now are starting to see that. So that does give you leverage going into a school. I have worked, with a range of different head teachers, and you do get some head teachers that say, well, I didn't have to do that. Or, gosh, they just need to toughen up.
Yeah.
They don't, we had to do it like this. Yeah. It's a job. That's what it demands. So I do hear that a lot. And, my job is to listen, and my job is to challenge leaders, isn't it? It's and constructively challenge. It is about trying to share perspective, because if we all have these what were high expectations back in the day, no one says it's really important, and that's what the children deserve, high expectations. They deserve nothing less than the very, very best. That's what I'd want for my children. It's what you'd want for your children. So it's about how do we manage to get really high expectations that lead to really high standards without killing our teachers in the process of doing so.
And being aware of that.
That's it. And as a head, I think that does take a huge amount of emotional intelligence and really good people skills and really good leadership skills as well. So I'm not saying it's easy. I've got this ideal in my head about how it should be done, but working with people, it is, I know with one head teacher, she will always constructively challenge, and we have very healthy conversation, and I will just say, that's not how I would do it, but that's fine. And I know that some of the conversations that we're having are definitely rubbing off on her. I know that because she will say, well, I'm thinking that I'm going to give some PPA time at home to my leaders. So I know that she's starting to see that. But I know earlier, I've just reminded myself, because you said what keeps a teacher at school.
Yeah.
That is another really good tip. PPA at home is just golden.
Yeah. And do you know what? It really is. I remember being in the PPA room when I was a secondary teacher, and there were like 6 computers in there, and I hated it if there were anyone else in there, because you just couldn't get anything done. Because for teachers, oh my word, there's another adult in the room, and I get to speak instead of acting.
And
absolutely. It is difficult. Even now, it's like gold to have a morning at home where nobody's in the house.
Exactly.
I get so much done.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I get up at 5 a.m.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You think if teachers had that, even if they just had and that's why coaching is so important. It's such an important part of that process, because you're giving people the headspace to just get off one of my favourite sayings, get off the dance floor and, stand on the balcony.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what it allows you to do.
And it's interesting that you said headspace, because Kate Aspin, who was, her podcast was published last Thursday, but by the time this comes out, it won't have been. But she talked about time to reflect, headspace to reflect on the teaching. There's no time in teaching to sit and go, what actually went well and what didn't go well, and what do I need to improve on? So yes,
definitely.
Headspace. And a lot of the personal development things, like just before we started filming, we talked about the Miracle Morning. Obviously that's probably not going to be the right kind of personal development book for teachers, but it is, for business. And I think that does advocate 10 minutes of silence in the morning, because it's all about thinking and reflecting and having that time for yourself. I think
definitely.
Before I had children, I never realised how much I needed that. But now I really do.
Absolutely. But the Miracle Morning would support a teacher that does wake up early, is an early riser, and actually is into meditation and spirituality. That's a great book, because everything that you've just described there are really the sort of principles in that book. Because spirituality and meditation for so many is just, it gives you that space to think.
Do better.
I
always think of it as geared to business, because I think, setting yourself up to achieve big goals. Okay then, so Kyle So Kyle's written me 4 interesting questions. I thought he would. So Kyle's actually married to a head teacher, so I bet he's been talking to his husband. Right. So he wants to know, but it could be his husband Lee. What are the biggest challenges you've faced when you've been working in challenging schools?
There's so many. Where do I start? Okay. The biggest challenge in working in challenging schools has been lack of process, lack of policy, and this is the hardest one, I would say, out of everything. It's actually have you heard of the conscious competence ladder?
Possibly, but remind me.
Okay, so really it's a ladder that leads you from being unconsciously incompetent to consciously competent.
Right, yeah.
So a teacher that's 5 years in experience, is doing the job, get the results, they'll be consciously competent. Unconsciously competent. They could do the job without, it's like driving a car.
Yeah.
You don't know how you got from A to B because now your driving is unconsciously competent.
Yes.
But if you've got staff that you go in who have been not led in the right way and have worked and haven't achieved results for the children, then often they are working as unconsciously incompetent.
Yeah.
And that's been the greatest challenge because you've got teachers that have met standards, have proved they can do the job, but are not demonstrating that level of ability or skill in the classroom. So taking them through that journey, and that's where, the Every Teacher Matters project and the coaching and everything started to really play, like I said to you, and I reached that sort of point where it was about well-being, but it was like, how do we get to well-being? And it is through taking people through a process, because it is about helping and supporting and guiding and directing, but ultimately, the only time where you make a difference or you start to have self-improvement is when that's inspired action and that's self-motivated. Yeah. So that process takes you through that.
When they realise actually that they have to do something.
Yeah, definitely.
And it is difficult, isn't it? And I like how you've said coaching through, because often schools can just be like, right, okay, well, we need to find a way to get you out, especially if they are on a high pay scale.
Very much so.
And because I've done a lot of supply, but not necessarily, so I did do 2 long terms, but I've also visited the same schools a lot. And it's no secret to anybody.
Yeah.
And how's that helping a teacher's well-being?
It doesn't at
I
all.
could, obviously I won't name, but I can think off the top of my head loads of different schools, and I can picture the teachers. Yeah. And if I knew as a supply teacher going in maybe once every few weeks, then you've got to think that's not great for well-being at all, is it?
It's not at all. It's really, really sad. So they would be the main things that I would say have been really challenging.
Okay. So Kyle's next question then. So have you found a direct correlation between schools in need of strong leadership and the well-being of staff and children?
Very much so, and a lot of what I've covered with you already today, and that is about emotional intelligence. It's about being a compassionate leader. It's about not knowing and understanding that there's a hierarchy, but rolling your sleeves up and being very, very much part of the team. High visibility as a leader and leading by example all the way. Definitely schools where you've got leaders and leadership teams that work from that premise. Absolutely, in my eyes, you can see that they're happy schools. They're schools that are leading the way. They're schools that they manage to retain their staff. And they're schools where the children actually are thriving.
Yeah, that's good to know though. Okay, so as a school culture then, this is Kyle again. A school culture plays a vital role in the well-being of both staff and children. How do you monitor the impact of the coaching? So again,
I think if someone's got you in for coaching, then the head sees the value in it. Whenever someone sees the value in what you're doing, they're going to make an investment in it. And when that investment is made, then that's an investment in the staff. And then what you do is you work very much in conjunction with the school improvement plan. You speak to the head teacher about the goals for coaching. Are they goals that support the school improvement plan? Are they goals that support the individual? So it's very much about having a framework of discussion, and then having the the way that my coaching works is very much about 6 sessions, always starting from a personal point of view, personal first, professional second, because, you know, that absolutely naturally, you know, lead somebody forward into having progress in their professional life. And then after that, it is about sitting down, and because the process is confidential, the only thing that is shared with the head teacher, if it's coaching with an individual, not a group, then it's about the goals for the outcome for those sessions. And then the head teacher has that transparency that even though what is discussed because teachers don't want to discuss their personal, you know, with the head, and they often ask because it can be such a powerful session or sessions that they're very tearful, they're very emotional, and they do sort of say, you're not going to say anything, are you? And it is always, no, I'm not going to say anything. This is a very confidential space. So the head is very supportive and understanding that that space that's being provided for coaching is a confidential process. But what they know is that this is the outcome for coaching. Yeah. And then they have that, and then the coachee also knows that as a result of this, my practice is going to improve, and these are the areas for improvement.
So is that when you normally pulled in then, when a teacher maybe is unconsciously incompetent? To turn them around? It's
different for different people, really. But yes, that has been a session that I've led, or a package of sessions that I've led. But there's also been teachers that are struggling with behaviour management. So there's been a very specific, you know, there's a confidence issue often with behaviour. There's a teacher that has a confidence issue, so it's working on confidence. I've worked with staff, and I'm working with a head teacher where they are being supported by an academy trust, and the school is going through, you know, a real period of change. So then we're looking at a very values-based approach to bringing people on board and aligning with the school's values and the school mission. So it's different for different, you know, people, which is absolutely the unique circumstances that we deal with in schools.
Yeah, and different schools as well. Okay, so this one's Helen then. So have you found that coaching sessions then need to be revisited by schools every few years, just because of staff turnover, and you forget, don't you? Yeah,
absolutely. So I think the schools that I'm working with, where it's working very successfully, is that the head teacher understands that it's 6 sessions, but alongside those 6 sessions with individual members of staff or group coaching sessions is an approach to staff CPD around personal development. So we're looking at time management and self-efficacy. So some of those coaching principles start to play out in whole school staff CPD, whilst you've got individuals such as the senior leadership team being coached, but the whole ethos in the school starts to develop. So you're looking at mindfulness and meditation, because for some schools they believe in that, you know. It's about appealing to lots of different personality types and lots of types of, you know, leadership approaches. For some schools it's about looking at the risk of burnout, and it's about staff, you know, really making a commitment to their own self-care. And it's about, for some it's about identifying stress triggers. It's about food. I talked about this briefly. It's about, you know, how does food affect our mood, and how do we approach that? So what can we eat? Because, you know, donuts in the staff room aren't always conducive. They're a nice treat, but they aren't always conducive to us, and people are a lot more health conscious in what they're eating. So what works really well is when there's individual coaching going on, but there's also a whole school approach to a coaching culture, or a wellbeing culture in the school, and then sort of revisiting that with, so as a group of senior leaders that I have coached, I will go back at the end of this term just to do a check-in on them and to see where they are, if they're still meeting, you know, moving towards meeting those goals.
So if you do 6 sessions, what kind of timescales are we looking at?
Usually works really well over like 9 weeks. So you do 2 weeks and then have a break, 2 sessions, then a break, 2 sessions, and a break. So that takes over sort of about 9 weeks.
Okay, with a holiday.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, all right then. So Claire wants to know which of your workshops is the most successful or well received, and why?
So it's the 1 hour wellbeing workshop, and that's really where you look at self-care, you look at burnout, and you look at the indicators of stress, because they seem to hit the mark. You know, people don't always understand why they feel. You know, if you look at burnout, people will just say, oh, I feel really burnt out. I think I'm going to burn out if I carry on like this. But, you know, hopefully with what I've highlighted today, it's so much more than that. And I find it really fascinating, because I couldn't always understand at certain points why I was feeling like this. And for me, the the absolute cause of, burnout, which I don't think people really understand well enough, is the conflict of values. And I think when we look at the changing landscape of education and what we went into it as professionals and what it's become, we're so conflicted. And I think that's it eats you up. I know I speak to so many colleagues that they just feel really, really, really sad on the inside because it's not what they want, but they don't know what else to do.
This is it, and it's really hard to get a job outside teaching
really
as well.
Hard,
even though I think teachers have a lot of management skills. It'd be good if there was some kind of course that you could just do a quick conversion.
Definitely.
I can imagine that the wellbeing course is just a big eye-opener if teachers can go into it with the right mindset and an open mind. Because often the CPD that you get in the staff room is about results and the children, but then to have something for yourself, and I think personal development for me, it's like an opportunity to choose something, to possibly change something in my life. And it's the same thing. If
definitely.
if I could take off 30 minutes of work every day, what an amazing opportunity.
It's 2.5 hours, isn't it, in your 5-day week? It's huge.
That is huge.
But you spoke earlier about, well-being and what does it mean? So the well-being workshop. So I think you do, it is very, very misconceived, what is well-being and what it might mean to you and what it will mean to me is different things. But at the heart of it is a feeling of wellness the majority of the time. So when I go into to do training, that will be the first sort of myth that I will dispel. What is well-being, because for some it's like, we really, really don't want to sit in another meeting where we're going to be talked to about time management, or where we're going to do a bit of meditation. I'm really not interested. I've got books to market. So people come from a very practical point of view, and it's about making it practical for them, but actually understanding that, if you're not feeling good about what you're doing every day, then we really need to start questioning the thoughts that we're having on a daily basis.
You've got to approach it with a positive mindset, haven't you?
Okay
then, last question before I ask the 4 that I ask at the end. Right, okay, so it's Kyle again. He says, what does your support look like in schools then, in terms of the time that you have with the school staff, and how do you ensure improvement?
So some of that I've answered already. So if it's the coaching, then that will be over a 9-week period, and sometimes it goes up because things happen in schools, don't they? So we're looking at 9 sessions over a period of a term, over roughly a period of a term. And then wellbeing workshops, usually everyone starts with the 1-hour wellbeing workshop, and then you can buy different workshops if that's relevant for your school. So there's no fixed time on that. And in terms of accountability and results, then those goals that are shared with the head teacher, they have that to refer to and know whether those individuals have moved forward in their practice, because that was what was shared. So actually when I'm not there, then it would be, you had this coaching and this were your goals and I've noticed. So it gives them a bit of a framework to start having a conversation, because it's an investment, isn't it, that the head's making as well.
Do you feel that you do the wellbeing workshop and then the people come up to you after a few weeks and go, I've tried that, and
it's phenomenal. The feedback is phenomenal. I had the pleasure of training 36 newly qualified teachers recently, and it was amazing feedback, because they were like, we just didn't think that, we need to take care of ourselves in this way. But so many people...
they're so fresh and ready to burn out, aren't they?
Absolutely. So it's really, really good to have that feedback from young teachers that are new in the profession, because they just felt really empowered. Like, we kind of know that we need to take care of ourselves, but unless someone's telling you to do it, you almost feel guilty. And we really mustn't. We mustn't feel guilty about taking care of ourselves. It's so essential to our well-being and to the children's.
So you talk about you do a well-being workshop, and you kind of, I suppose one of my questions was, how do teachers really feel about personal development? Because I know from a teaching background, I had no idea about it, and I probably be like, what is this? And I've only opened my mind to it from kind of a business point of view. But are there any, do you have like a books list, or do you send people down once you've had it opened up to them, is what I'm saying, from the wellbeing workshop? where could they go even if they don't go with you? Do you find that they're like, oh, I want more of this?
Yeah, very much so. So the project that I run is called Every Teacher Matters, and there's three facets to that project. So first is coaching, the second is training in schools that we've discussed, and then the third one is the network. So the network I run, it's a half-termly network. The next one is in Birmingham City Centre next Thursday, and that's the place to go. So if your school isn't buying into the support, then you still want a safe place, a confidential place with like-minded professionals where your wellbeing is at the heart of it, then come to the network. And I know that isn't viable for everybody, because here I am sat here in Yorkshire, but you can subscribe to the Every Teacher Matters newsletters as well, which kind of gives you lots of practical tips and tools and keeps you updated. And I think that the sky's the limit, really. So we've got some really exciting plans for the future as well in terms of creating some communities. And I've had some contact with colleagues that would really like to take it into other areas as well. So
oh, that's really good.
Yeah,
and I think there's lots of books that teachers can listen to out there.
Definitely.
That just help them to be better, to manage time better, to do things better. And I think sometimes we think that we don't have control, but maybe we do. We're just not taking it.
Yeah.
We're just not trying to take control.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could solve the life-work balance problem for teachers by waving a magic wand, what would you do?
I would give more autonomy. I would give more autonomy. I think my approach would be very much about these are the teacher's standards. This is what the job involves. We've got to get the children to these thresholds. They've got to meet these expectations. I really don't mind how you do it, as long as you do it. That really would be it. That would
be amazing,
wouldn't
it?
In my mind, it really is that simple. That you've got to consistently meet these standards. So I didn't make these standards up. These standards are there. We chose this career, we chose this profession, and we've got to accept that and roll our sleeves up and go for it. The children, their needs have to be met, which will be demonstrated through those standards. As long as you do that, if you want to come in at 7 because it suits you to come in at 7, you do that. If you want to come in at 8 o'clock and leave at 4:30, absolutely fine by me. That works as well. But you know what? There has to be a level of trust. There has to be a level of autonomy, and there has to be a level of understanding that as a head teacher, there has to be more flexibility in the way that you approach your staff. And that would be my wish, really, that let them do it how they want to do it, as long as they get it done and they're happy.
Yeah, and the children are happy as well.
Absolutely, because that's what filters onto the children if the teacher is happy.
Yeah. Okay. Where do you think education is going to go in the next 10 years?
I really don't know. It's such a difficult question to answer, because I think the changes that I've seen myself, just since 2014, that just seems to be a significant turning point. Obviously, there were certain people making decisions at the time. I'll mention no names, but I know you're smiling at me. You know exactly who I mean. Things have changed so enormously that the landscape of education is unrecognisable, which lots of us feel have destroyed, the profession for not what we wanted. But I think that there are some innovative people that are doing lots of different things to show the profession as a whole that we can be game changers.
Yeah,
we absolutely can be game changers, and as long as we're making the right noise in the right way, bringing it to the right attention to the people that are decision makers, then who knows. But I think that really, unless we start to really think radically and be really innovative in what we're doing and how we are approaching our profession, how can it get any worse? It is at crisis point already. So I do believe, because I'm really positive and I'm really optimistic, I really do believe that people will start to approach things differently. And for me, giving the teachers the voice, the autonomy, the skills about self-care, they've got to start to assert these boundaries and enforce these boundaries, so that people that are in power making decisions have to start to think, actually, I might need to do things a bit differently here.
Yeah, and listen. Yeah. I think teachers can be really innovative as well. We just have to work within the boundaries that we're given, and we just have different boundaries to what we had 10 years ago right now.
That's right. Yeah.
And there are definitely strides to be made and things we can do. It's just working out what we can do.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And when you look at the focus of the inspection framework back on the curriculum, well, that's a really good sign, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because what that will really need is creative input again. And I know when I was happiest as a teacher, I was working in a school that did get to outstanding, but when we went through an inspection and we were good, one of the reasons that we didn't get outstanding during that inspection was because the curriculum was not creative, active and practical enough. And I remember the deputy head coming to myself. I was working in a 3-form entry school. It was one of the happiest years of my teaching career, without a doubt. Year 5 teacher, 2 colleagues, and she had a meeting with us and said, right, we've got to make our curriculum more creative, active and practical, and I'm giving you guys the autonomy just to pilot this, and you tell us what you think it needs. And I just remember that being that sense of A, you trust me, B, I know what to do because I've got those ideas, I've got that creativity, and now you're giving me the free rein to just go ahead and do that. And we did get outstanding at the next Ofsted inspection.
Well done.
So it works.
Yeah,
it works.
does work.
Yeah.
It does work. And people buy into it, don't they, when you give them the opportunities.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to ask you what you wanted to be when you grew up, because you've already told me it was a teacher through and through.
Yeah.
But who was your favourite teacher at school and why?
I think I had two. They were both male teachers, interestingly. It was Mr. Farnham at primary school, just because he was caring, he was very warm. It didn't matter what I did or how wrong or off the mark I was. I could go to him at any point with my book, and he would often, just make me feel good about what I was doing, and gave me lots of encouragement and positive praise for what I was doing, and just made me generally feel good about myself as a child. And very much the same at secondary school, because maths wasn't my strongest subject. I always found that much, much harder. And it was Mr. Horton in my secondary school. And again, it was take risks and have a go. And if you don't get it right, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Yeah. And I used to remember feeling really uptight, being quite shaky, walking up with my book because I wanted to get it right. And he would kind of look at me and say, doesn't matter. You've had a go. Let's go through it together. Yeah. So it's just very much about that nurturing approach. Yeah.
And you just need to feel relaxed, don't you?
Definitely.
To succeed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We've covered so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So many amazing tips. I'm really excited for teachers to listen to some of these and start thinking about personal development, because it's something I know I feel really passionate about, but I feel is maybe not so much in the teaching space.
Yeah, I agree.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Claire, for having me on. Thank you.
Thank you.